Hey guys, welcome to Poor Man Mods and welcome to part one of my German Fox body build. Now a few months ago I did release a video about this car that I recently acquired. If you have not seen it, I highly recommend that you check it out. But for those that did not see it, my plans for this 1999 Mercedes Sl500 is to make it as Fox body Mustang, American drag car as I possibly can. The reason being, if you look at the car, it pretty much resembles a Fox body with a sprinkle of German on it. It is uncanny. So my goal is to make it as Fox body as possible. When I take this thing to car shows, I want people to go, "What? Your Fox body is that?" And I would like to actually do some drag racing, maybe not competitive, but I would like it to go to the track. So I do want the car to perform, but I also want it to sound gnarly and also look like a Mustang. So today's video is part one of my German Fox body build, where I do some things to make it look like a Mustang or just a Ford in general, and really just eliminate a lot of the Mercedes. So my OG followers know that, throughout my videos and over the years, I have voiced my opinion about German cars. I'm just not the biggest fan of German cars mostly. I'm really not a big fan of Mercedes. I will say, as much crap as I have talked on German cars and Mercedes in the past, this car is really growing on me, and I have gained some respect for Mercedes, at least with some of the stuff they have done with this car. There is a lot of impressive engineering and some smart things and creative things that went into this car. Some stupid things, but overall this car has been more impressive and an eye-opener than annoying and aggravating. It's actually quite an amazing car, but I do not feel bad for essentially molesting it and undoing all the Mercedes. So here is my vision, all right? Whenever I do a modification to this car, a repair might be a little bit different, but if I'm gonna do a modification to this car, my main goal, my main focus is, can it be something Mustang related, Mustang inspired, more so Fox body, but if it's just Mustang in general, perfect, that's what I'm going for. If it can't be Mustang, can it be drag racing inspired, drag racing related, that sort of thing? And if it can't be that, can it at least be Ford inspired or Ford related? And if all else fails, if not that, at the very least, if I'm going to do a modification to this car, at the very least, not Mercedes. Whether that be something from another manufacturer or just something to eliminate Mercedes. I want to get rid of as much Mercedes as possible with this car. Now with that being said, at the end of this build, I know it's not going to be 100% not Mercedes. That's not the realistic goal, but whenever I think of a modification, have something in mind, that is the plan that I'm going to try to go with. At the very minimum, not Mercedes, but ideally something Mustang, drag race, or Ford inspired. So of course, the first thing that I had to do to this thing was wheels and suspension. So I reached out to my friends over at Cube Speed, and I will say the experience has been a little bit different because they did not offer the coilovers for this car on their website. I reached out and asked for them if they could get them or source them, and they did work with me. They sent me a couple things initially, and we ran into some hiccups. There was a couple setbacks, had to change some things, and just ran into a couple roadblocks. I think some of the information that they had in their database for the coilovers was wrong, but that's okay. Part of what I enjoy doing is working with companies and figuring out solutions and improving their product. And that's a lot of what I did when I worked at CJ Pony Parts, and I really like the product development side and helping companies produce better products. I'm not going to go over the coilovers too much in this video because I will have a whole video on that separately, but as the car sits right now, I do have the Cube suspension on it, and it's technically not coilovers. It is adjustable spring and shock, but they are separate. They're not together, so it's not a coilover. But the car rides absolutely amazing. I do have the damper set to the stiffer side, and it still rides like a Mercedes. It added a little bit of sport, but it's still very comfortable and totally daily drivable. But importantly, what it did was made the stance so much better. It looks so good. And it's okay that it's soft, because if I'm going to be drag racing this thing, you don't want the rear to be mega stiff. You want it to be able to transfer weight to the rear for better traction. Not that this thing has traction problems yet, but that might change in the future. And of course, once I got the ride height dialed in, I had to do wheels to this thing. And my wheel of choice, because of the vision I have for this car, I did Cobra replica wheels on this thing. And it was not even close a direct bolt-on modification. This took a lot of work. Some of the things I did were on the sketchier side, which I may or may not advise some people do. But what I had to do to get these wheels to fit, I shouldn't have gotten a square setup, but I did. They are 17 by 9s all the way around. I really should have gotten 17 by 8s or narrower up front, but I got them used off Marketplace for a good price, so 17 by 9s is what I got. And put 245s up front and 275s in the rear. The rears, though, to get the rear wheels to fit, cake. All I did was use 1-inch thick wheel spacer adapters that convert the Mercedes 5x112 bolt pattern to a 5x114 bolt pattern. Now, the bolts that came with the kit to bolt the spacer to the hub were too long, and I did have to trim them. When they went all the way into the wheel spacer, it was getting caught up in the parking brake and whatnot and was doing not good things. So I did have to trim those bolts. And then after that, the rear wheels went on and the fitment is damn near perfect. I do have to roll the fenders a little bit. There's a little bit of interference with the driver's side rear tire, even after raising the suspension a little bit, making it on the stiffer side back there. It still karate chops the tire a little bit. So I do have to roll that fender, but it looks so good. The front, however, was not as easy. If I had a thinner wheel, it probably could have been, but I made do with what I had. So when I used the same wheel spacer adapter up front, the wheel itself, not the tire, stuck out past the fender 1/4 of an inch, which I did not want. So it was, you pretty much can't get a thinner spacer than that. 1 inch, they really don't make the adapter spacers any thinner than that I could find. So I decided I'm gonna have to make custom hubs for this thing. So I took the hubs off, took the wheel bearings out, and since I've never ran a lathe before, I had a coworker of mine machine the back of the hub to make it nice and flat so I could press studs in. The back of the hub, there was no part of it that was flat. It was concave the whole way. And so I didn't want a stud to be pressed in and rock. So I had my coworker machine the back of it nice and flat. And then I took a wheel spacer, a 5x114 wheel spacer that was hub centric to that hub, clamped it down with some wood clamps, and then I used a center finding punch so it fit perfectly in the hole of the wheel spacer. And I marked the center of the bolt holes of the 5x114 pattern on the hub and drilled them out to press new studs in. Now here's a trick to find out what drill bit size you need for drilling holes for studs. I'm sure machinists know the trick, like if you measure the knurling, they know what size you need. I do not know that information, but here's a trick for you. If you know what stud you're gonna be using, so I went with studs off of an S550 Mustang, which the threads are M14. If you go to ARP's website and you look up replacement wheel studs for whichever car you choose, on their listing, it tells you the drill bit size that you need if you're going to be installing those studs into an aftermarket axle. I did not use ARP wheel studs, but what I did, I used S550 Mustang wheel studs, which are also extremely similar, if not the same, as Ford Expedition wheel studs. I got mine off Amazon, and technically I ordered Ford Expedition wheel studs. But the knurling is the same as the S550. So, ARP's website said that I needed a 39/64 drill bit if I wanted to install those studs into new axles, so that's what I ordered. And when doing something this precise, you really don't want to use a drill press. You want to use a mill, which is a lot more precise. There's less wobble in the drill bit. So that's what I did. My work has a mill, and I'm fortunate enough to have access to that. So I did use the mill to drill the 39/64 holes in the hub, and then pressed the studs in, and it worked pretty well. Now, of course, it might be off a few thousandths. It is not perfect because I am only human, and this is the first time that I did this. So I would genuinely recommend, if you're thinking about doing this, chances are you don't have access to a lathe, and chances are you don't have access to a mill. And I thought long and hard about this myself, and I just decided to take a crack at it. But I would recommend, if you're going to do this, just send them out to like an axle or a drive shaft shop and have them do it. It probably won't be that expensive to send your hubs out and get them re-drilled into 5x114. That's what I'd recommend. I really wouldn't recommend doing this, but you know, I wanted to give it a crack since I had access to the machines. And yeah, so once I got them drilled out, I got the studs pressed in, and I thought to myself, well, now that it's 5x114, I can't use the Mercedes brake rotor unless I re-drill it, and I really don't want to be re-drilling the bolt pattern in a brake rotor every time I change the front rotors, which I know that's not that often, but still, I don't want to have to be re-drilling the bolt pattern every time. So I did some digging on Rock Auto, and if you don't use Rock Auto for a research tool and you're a hot rodder or car builder, modifier, whatever, you're messing up. Rock Auto is a really good research tool. You don't even need to buy from them, but it's a really good research tool because they list specs, so many specs for the parts on their website. So I went through their website and I was looking for a brake rotor that was 5x114 that was the same or very similar to all the dimensions of the factory Mercedes rotor. And what do you know? An S197 Mustang is extremely similar in all dimensions to the brake rotor that came off this car. It's 5x114. The hub bore is a little bit bigger, which is perfect because I can 3D print a hub-centric ring for that. It's a bigger problem if the hub bore was smaller, but since it's bigger, I can 3D print a hub-centric ring for that. And the Mustang rotor is like 2 or 3 millimeters larger in diameter, which has not been a problem. I have put some miles on this car and it has been no problem at all. And the height of it, so where the back of the disc is in relation to the front of the hat, that is different by just a few millimeters also. So to correct that, I just needed to put a washer where the brake caliper bolts to the hub. And wouldn't you know, I had to do the same thing on my Mark III Supra when I installed Mercedes brake calipers on that. So now I have two vehicles with Mercedes brake calipers on them with washers. So I am no stranger to that. So with a hub-centric ring and a washer, the S197 brake rotors fit pretty much perfect on this Mercedes. So now, in the front, I've got Mustang brakes and Mustang wheels and Ford Expedition lug studs. It's absolutely ridiculous. If only I could find a Mustang brake caliper to go on there too. So after I got the suspension sorted out and after I got the Mustang wheels on and looking so good on the car, there was another thing I had to change about this car. One thing that was driving me nuts, and it drove me nuts because it's something that I touched all the freaking time. The steering wheel and a couple areas on the door panels have become sticky, and the steering wheel drove me nuts. It did not inspire any kind of fun or anything like that. It was super boring. So of course I made the decision to rip it out and put a grip royal steering wheel in there. Yeah, I don't... Oopsie. I did not go with a quick release hub, and I can do that later. So I did later find, going through the interwebs, I found on Amazon 2 more hub adapters. One was a knockoff energy hub that was meant for some other type of Mercedes, and the other was a Momo knockoff hub that was also meant for a different kind of Mercedes. So when they came in, I tested out both, and wouldn't you know, in the complete opposite of my luck and Poor Man Mod's fashion, the cheap one was the one that worked. The clearance between the steering wheel and the turn signal stalk right here is a bit closer than what I was hoping for. The $30 one didn't work. It was the $15 hub adapter that worked, and it worked freaking perfect. I don't know how I got that lucky. Usually it's the more expensive one that works, but hey, I'll take it, and that is a heck of a poor man mod because the hub adapter was $15, and the steering wheel that I got from Grip Royal, and the shipping, and the horn button, all of that was like over $300. So I've got like a $300 really nice steering wheel and a $15 hub adapter. Nice. And here's an interesting thing that I found out when I was messing with this car. The horn only works with the ignition on, which may be a German thing, maybe it's a Mercedes thing. I just thought that was interesting because every other car that I've ever had experience with, the horn worked all the time. But this one only works with the ignition turned on. Now here's a question for you. Now that I have this aftermarket steering wheel installed and I removed the factory steering wheel, how many lights do you think are on the dash now after removing the factory steering wheel? The answer is 3. How many light bulbs do you think I'm going to remove from the dash? While that gauge cluster was out, I did come up with 2 other little side quests. Take out the incandescent bulbs of the cluster and put nice white LEDs in. Super easy, and it just makes it look so much better. Which, you know, that's an upgrade that most car enthusiasts do. But the other side quest that I thought of was something that I don't think anyone has asked for. But it just goes along with the theme of, can it be Ford inspired or can it not be Mercedes? And I came up with the idea while the cluster was out to modify the door chime. And so what I found, I went on Amazon and found a 12-volt programmable speaker that can hold like 3 megabytes of storage, so about 1 song. And you can put any audio file that you want on this thing and wire it up to any circuit. You could hook it up to a dome light circuit, a footwell lighting circuit. I chose to hook it up to the wiring behind the gauge cluster and mount it behind the gauge cluster like the factory chime. And I hooked it up to the factory door open circuit, and that only works with the driver door, which is fine because I just hooked it up to the factory circuit. And wouldn't you know, I put on the 2015 and up door chime on this speaker. So now, when you open up the door in my 1999 Mercedes Sl500, you get a Ford door chime.
This is ridiculous. Now it's a Ford. So it's worth noting that when I installed that speaker, I installed it into the open door circuit according to the wiring in the back of the gauge cluster. So it actually only works when you open up the driver door. That's the way the circuit works. I wired it directly into the open door circuit. But if you wanted it to work with the passenger door, you could actually wire it up into your footwell lighting or like the puddle light. That would also work. So there's a couple different ways you could wire it up.
Something that nobody has asked for, but it's just one of those things to confuse the hell out of people and to just seal the deal that I'm trying to make this thing as Ford and Mustang as I can. When I take this to a show or take this to the Mercedes dealer or the Ford dealer and they open the door and hear the chime, people aren't going to believe it, and it's going to be hilarious. But you could totally do this, you know, to any car, the door chime thing. This is something that no one has asked for, but now knowing that you can do it and do it cheap and easy, there's a lot of cool things that you could do. It was only like 30 bucks for that speaker, and you could hook it up to really anything. It doesn't need to be a door chime. You could wire it to any circuit for any function and put any noise that you want on it. But now that you know it exists, I bet you some of you are going to come up with some pretty cool things to do with it. It's just a 12-volt programmable speaker. Super freaking cool. Now the final 2 things that I did to this were to address the front and rear emblem of this car. And typically Mercedes people like to show off that they have a Mercedes, and I'm one of the very few, I'm sure I'm not the only, but I'm probably one of the very few that wanted to eliminate the Mercedes emblem in the grille on this car. And you know, doing some digging, there really aren't any aftermarket grills for this car. There are different style grills from other trims and models that you can put on, but there aren't really any aftermarket grills that eliminate the factory emblem. So since it doesn't exist, I took it upon myself to figure it out on my own. And this was a pretty big project. I knew going in it wasn't going to be easy, but it turned out to be a lot more of an investment than I was expecting. So I did buy another grill for the car. I did not want to mutilate the factory grill. Spent like 120 bucks on a used grill. So I cut out the circle that would hold the Mercedes diamond emblem, and then I 3D scanned it and 3D printed filler pieces to connect the bars in the middle. And I used a bunch of hot staples and plastic weld to make everything join together. And then there was honeycomb that ran along the grill too that I also replicated in my 3D software and 3D printed that. So I made that look pretty darn seamless by attaching more honeycomb on the back. And I also had to modify the chrome surround because I had to cut that out when I removed the emblem. The black plastic part and the honeycomb I sprayed with bed liner. I use bed liner because it's good at covering imperfections. Of course, it gives it that textured look. And then the chrome trim that goes here, I plastered it black to give it kind of a two-tone look. And the honeycomb is looking pretty darn good. You know, you do see this, edge here, which we are just going to have to live with and see how it looks when I get the chrome trim on. But I am finished filling and sanding this gap and this gap here. I have so much time in filling and sanding and filling and sanding. It is not perfect, but I am tired of sanding. And I probably have like 30 hours of manual labor into making this grill, just filling all the voids that I cut out with epoxy and sanding it and trying to make it as smooth as possible. But there was a bit of a problem. The factory hood latch, when you pop the hood, right in like the crotch area of the factory diamond, right here is where the hood latch comes out. And you would pull on that to open up the hood. Well, since I totally modified my grill, there was not an area for that to come out of. So I cut out a section of the honeycomb and put a remove before flight tag on there. So now when you pop the hood, you pull on the remove before flight tag and it works just like factory and it looks freaking awesome. And most importantly, it's not Mercedes. And then of course in the back, we also had to get rid of the Mercedes emblems back there. And I just went on Amazon and found a Ford oval American flag and stuck that where the factory Mercedes emblem was on the trunk. And now on the outside of the car, the only Mercedes badging that's left is that little circle right there on the hood. And that will not be there for long because in the future, not sure how far in the future, but in the future, we will be doing a cowl hood on this thing. It is happening. So now that I've told you the story and I've painted the picture for you, I think now it's time we take a look at this thing and just see how good it looks and how much like a Mustang it looks. And I have to add, I don't know why people are sleeping on this car. This was so freaking cheap. And they're cheap to fix and cheap to work on, and they're not hard to work on. And it's a freaking two-door V8 rear drive convertible. I don't know why like nobody wants these. These things are freaking awesome. If you're looking for a cheap project car, seriously, you should consider this. All right, so that is my German Fox Body Mustang. I hope you guys enjoyed this video as much as I did. I am so excited about this. Everything that I've done to this, I absolutely freaking love. and I have really fallen in love with this car. I don't know why people are sleeping on these. These things are freaking awesome. So I am really excited about this build. I'm gonna be going pretty crazy with this thing. As crazy as I went with the Supra, maybe even crazier with this thing. This is not a stage 2, stage 3 WRX build that I'm doing. This is gonna be pretty gnarly. And some of the things that I have planned for this, people are either gonna think I'm crazy or it's not possible, but I am determined. This thing is gonna be freaking awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope maybe you learned something. I hope you're as excited for this project as I am. And I will see you guys in the next video, whatever that may be. Can't promise what it'll be, but I can promise you'll enjoy it. See ya.